Hi everyone, this is Marcel from Genelec and I would like to give you a walkthrough of our Genelec Loudspeaker Manager GLM version 5. This version is fully compatible with all of our SAM speakers and subwoofers. In addition to our standard GLM calibration kit, GLM 5 now also supports our 9320A SAM reference controller. We have a separate video about calibrating and controlling your system with the 9320. In this walkthrough we'll cover all of the basics: how to set up your system, how to measure it, how to evaluate the results, and how to make use of the advanced functions of GLM. Let's start. Before we can use our GLM software, we'll have to configure the hardware. In addition to SAM speakers or subwoofers, you will need the GLM calibration kit or the 9320. The GLM calibration kit consists of a network adapter and a calibrated measuring microphone. Step 1 is to connect this interface via USB to your PC or Mac. Now we connect the first network cable to the adapter. The measuring microphone is also connected to the adapter. It's marked with a microphone symbol. Make sure you don't get confused with the connector for the volume controller. And then we connect the first network cable that comes from the network adapter to one of the RG45 connectors of the first speaker. We use the second port of the speaker to run a cable to the next one. And from there we can go to a subwoofer, for example. Now all of the components of your system are connected to the GLM network. You can simply run this as a daisy chain, and you can have a lot more devices in the chain, for example for larger immersive setups like 714. Always check the position of the stored dip switch, because this dip switch has to be set to on to use the saved settings in standalone mode without GLM. Otherwise, the saved settings will not be used in standalone mode. There are a few models that don't have dip switches, for example 8320 and 8330. These will always use the saved settings. But for all of the bigger models, make sure that this dip switch is set to on. And now we are ready to start the software. You can download it under Software in your My Genelec account. If you haven't registered already, you can do so under my.genelec.com. When you open GLM for the first time and have not used it before, it will start with the Define SAM system layout. You should log into your My Genelec account first. You will then have access to services like our Room Acoustic Report Grade. You can log in using the Services menu or by clicking on the new icon in the upper right corner. On the left side, you can see all of the devices that are now connected to your GLM network. For me, it's a pair of 8341s and a 7360 subwoofer. Therefore, I would select as the layout style Stereo with Sub. We also have prepared immersive and surround layouts. You can now simply drag and drop the devices to their positions on the grid. In GLM 5, you will now also have to drag the icon of the network adapter or the 9320 to the grid first. Just place it in the middle. When I click on a device, the LED of the speaker or the subwoofer will start to blink, and you'll hear a noise from this device. This was my first speaker, so I placed it in the right cell. This is the subwoofer, and this is my left speaker. Now let's confirm the layout. In the next step, we define the SAM group. First of all, we name it. Let's use Stereo with Sub position 1. There's an option to use a system delay. For example, if you are using a projector that has some added delay, and then you can compensate for that. If a subwoofer is part of your system and you are using bass management, then you have these two options as well. First of all, you can define if it's global or individual. For my setup, I want to use the same crossover for the complete system. That's why I stay with global. And now the crossover frequency. The default setting is 85 Hz, which means everything below 85 Hz is played back by the subwoofer, and everything above 85 Hz is played back by the speakers. What's the best crossover frequency for you? There are some main aspects. The lower the crossover, the harder it gets to localize the subwoofer. Higher crossovers can give you even more SPL headroom for your speakers because they no longer have to reproduce the low-end content. This can also give you a higher resolution. And then you should have a look at the frequency responses of the sub and the speakers after calibration. Let's say your speakers show a dip at 60 Hz and you cannot find a better placement for it. Then a crossover that is higher, for example 85 Hz, can solve this problem, if the subwoofer plays linear in that range. And in a lot of cases it's possible to find a position for the sub, which results in a linear response after calibration. Use GLM to find the best placement. Under input mode you can choose between analog or digital. If you are using digital, you can click on the speakers and then you can choose which channel should be reproduced. Usually you run 2 channels on one AECBU cable. The left speaker should play back channel A, and the right speaker should play back B. And the subwoofer usually, of course, should play back both. Speakers placed on the left side of the grid are set to A automatically, speakers on the right side will have B selected. I'll now switch back to analog, because this is what I'm using here. Group sensitivity gives you the option to set a level offset for groups. Let's say you're using an analog group and then a digital group. Then you can, for example, set this group sensitivity to -30 dB, and then you can switch between groups without level jumps. And the last feature is extended phase linearity. It's visible for all newer models of the ones. If this is set to on, which is the default, it means that the group delay is optimized and linearized down to approximately 100 Hz. I now confirm the group and name the setup file. Now check if the serial number you see here is the same that's printed on your microphone. If you are using the microphone that was part of your original GLM calibration kit or was delivered with your 9320, this is always correct right from the start. Every single microphone is calibrated and we load the specific frequency response in GLM using the serial number. Under calibration mode you can choose if you want to measure a single point or multi-point. For a typical stereo setup, I would always start with single point. If you want to have a wider listening zone, you can also go for multi-point, which simply means that you measure one point and then you add another. You can measure as many points as you like. The first point is always weighted by 50%. But of course the result is always a compromise, especially if there are longer distances between the measurement points. Symmetrical EQ is the default option. It means that we'll have individual EQs for the bass range and symmetrical EQs, which means the same EQ setting for left and right, for the mid-range and the heights. Having the same filters for this frequency range will improve the stereo imaging and phantom center, while using individual filters for the bass range can help with unbalanced responses that are very different between left and right. If you want to have completely individual filters, then choose this setting. And then, of course, we should always use AutoCal 2, which is the latest version of our calibration algorithm that is calculated in the cloud. If your computer does not have internet access, you can download the old local AutoCal package, which is AutoCal 1. Click on Start Calibration. Follow the instructions to place the microphone at ear height at your listening position, pointing upwards. The room dimensions you can enter here are not needed for the calibration itself. They are used for our grade report, a detailed PDF report showing you all details of your room acoustics and the overall system performance. Please check out our grade video for further information. In GLM 5, the grade report can be ordered after the calibration in the Services menu. Make sure that you are already logged into your account before the calibration to generate the grade report. Now click on Measure. There's a short countdown of 5 seconds to get out of the sound field. And of course it should be quiet in the room now. Each speaker and subwoofer will play back a sweep that is recorded with the microphone. The data is sent to the cloud and AutoCal will calculate the optimum settings for your room acoustics and the placement of the system. AutoCal 2 now knows what's going on in your room and calculates the filter settings to reduce the influences of your room. It will also take care of the correct levels for all speakers and especially the level between the subwoofer and the speakers. It also adjusts the time of flight, which is especially interesting for surround or immersive setups, where the speakers should have the same distance to your ears. And if they have not, they should be delayed, and of course the level has to be adjusted. We are done and we click on Save and confirm AutoCal. Because we have a subwoofer in our system for bass management, the phase should be aligned. This is done with the next step, AutoPhase. Just click on your subwoofer and one speaker to define the calibration pair. We recommend using the speaker that is closest to the subwoofer. Click on Start Calibration. GLM will now detect the correct phase setting for the subwoofer to ensure a flat frequency response at the crossover. Click on Confirm AutoPhase. And this is the main window of GLM 5. In the top left corner you can see if you are logged into your My Genelec account. Click on it to log in. If you are logged in, it turns to white. If you click on it again, it shows your user information, and you could log out if needed. Right beside it you find the System Power On/Off button, an easy option to switch your complete setup on and off. On the left side you'll find all the functions you need to use GLM as a monitor controller. So you can adjust the volume, you can mute your system, you can dim it by 20 dBs, and you can define level presets. If you want to change the settings, just select the value you would like to have. Then go to Group Preset, Set Preset Level. And for example, we define this as Preset 1. The moment we change this value, the preset is no longer selected. You can turn on and off the bass management. If you turn it off, the subwoofer stops playing and the speakers play back everything in full range. The moment you turn the bass management on again, everything below the crossover frequency is played back by the subwoofer, and everything above is played back by the speakers. You can also turn on and off the calibration to evaluate what's happening in your room. And here you can select what happens the moment you click on one of the icons of the speakers or the subwoofers. If you set this to Edit, then a click on the speaker will open the Acoustic Editor. Here you can see exactly what the reality is in your room. This is the red curve that's been measured. And then you can see the blue curve, which shows the filters that have been applied by GLM to compensate for these influences. The green one is the resulting one. We'll have a look at this in detail a little later. If you choose Info, a click on the icon will open the Info panel. You can also right-click on the icon and select Show Info. This panel shows a lot of useful information depending on the model. For example, the position of the stored dip switch, the bass management settings, or the input mode. And you have access to the firmware updates. Just click on Firmware to open the window. You can then select all devices that should be updated. Then click on Update. For safety reasons, the firmware of the network adapter or the 9320 is updated separately. Just click on the icon in the middle and you will see an Update button if there is a new firmware available. It's already done for my system, so it says Up to Date. Let's have a look at the other options. We can also select Solo. The moment you click on the speaker, it is soloed. If you click on another one, the first one is muted and the new one is soloed. If you want to set more speakers into solo mode, just hold down Command and click on the next one. Mute is easy to understand. You click on the speaker and then it's muted. If you hold down Command, you can add another speaker to this muted group. Let's now have a look at groups and how to use them. Groups are always shown on the right side. As you can see, at the moment there's only one. And now let's generate another one to change the overall sound. Therefore, we go to Group Preset and choose Duplicate. And now you see we have a second group, which has the same acoustical settings as our first group. We now want to have a little more warmth and a little more bass. How can we achieve this? Just go to Group Preset and select the Sound Character Profiler. This is the easiest way to change the overall tonality of your complete system. If you want to have more bass, we should reduce the mid and high frequencies. So I just choose, let's say, 100 Hz, and then I reduce this, for example, by 2 dBs. You can of course adjust this exactly to your needs. If you now go for Confirm, you can see in the frequency responses of the speakers, 2 filters are now grayed out and used by the Sound Character Profiler. And one of these filters is used to do exactly what we wanted. We've reduced everything above 100 Hz by 2 dBs. And as I said, this is now applied to all speakers, so the complete system is tuned. And of course you can not only do this with a stereo system, you could also use this for an immersive setup. And this saves you a lot of time compared to editing every single speaker. Now it would be nice if this group is no longer named Group 2. To change this, go to Group Preset, Edit. And then, for example, we can name this group More Bass. Confirm it, we skip AutoCal and we skip AutoPhase. And now we have our second group, More Bass. Another advantage of groups is that you can measure another position. Let's say this one has been measured exactly at your main working position. Now you want to have another group for someone sitting behind you. To do so, we just duplicate this group again, and now we'll remeasure this group. We go to Group Preset and then we choose Calibrate. Now you know what's going on, just place the microphone at the new listening position and hit Start Calibration. You will then have another group for the second position. And it's really easy for you to switch between these positions. This is your position. This is the position of the person sitting behind you. For example, on a producer's couch. What's also possible with groups is that you can define a level offset. Just go for Group Preset and then Edit. And now you can see here's the so-called group sensitivity. And you can use this to offset a group. Let's say, for example, this group should be 10 dBs lower than the others. Change the group sensitivity, confirm group. We can skip AutoCal and skip AutoPhase. And then let's say we are at -10. So this group will be 10 dBs lower, playing at -20 dBs. We also show the basic information about the group in the tooltips. If you point at group 3, you can see group sensitivity -10. This can also be useful if you are using a digital source. Let's say you are usually at around -30, but you still want to use the complete range of the fader or your volume controller. Then you can define an offset for this group with -30 dBs. And this would mean if the fader is completely up, you are still at -30. You can change the order of groups. Just hold down Command, click on the group and choose Move Group Preset up or down. I can now show you another way of setting a maximum level restriction. Just place the fader at your maximum value and then go for Setup, Maximum Level Restriction, Set to Current Level. And this means that you now simply cannot get any higher than -20. If you want to undo this, just go to Maximum Level Restriction again and choose Remove. And these features are really useful for the safety of your hearing. The second safety option is the system startup level that also can be set here. I'll now show you how you can store settings to your speakers for standalone mode, which means that the GLM network adapter is no longer connected to your computer or the speakers are not connected to the GLM network. In standalone mode, you can only use one setting. So first of all, I select the group to be stored to the speakers, and then I go to Group Preset and Store to loudspeakers. Now you can adjust a lot of options. First of all, the startup level. Let's say we worked with -10 because this matches our source. Then we should have -10 here as well. So the speakers will wake up with this sensitivity setting. You can also store the maximum level restriction we talked about for standalone mode. ISS means Intelligent Signal Sensing. And we call it also sleep delay because it means that after a defined period of time, the speaker will fall asleep. So it will go to the standby mode. Let's say we'll set this to 10 minutes. If there's audio again, the speaker will wake up automatically. ISS sensitivity can be used if there is, for example, some amount of noise from your source, which of course always should be avoided. There are 3 settings: high, medium and low. And if we hold our mouse here and have the tooltips enabled, we can see high means -75 dBu, medium is -68, and low is -61. You can define if the LEDs should be on or off. And then there's the input selection. Default setting is automatic, which means the speakers use the analog inputs until there is a digital signal detected. Then it will switch to the digital input. If you don't want to use automatic, you can of course also choose analog or digital. There's also one more advantage of using automatic. If you select digital only and there is no signal detected, the speakers will always show a blinking red LED. And you can avoid this by choosing automatic, because then it shows green, somehow waiting for an analog signal. And the moment you play back your digital source, it will automatically switch back to the digital input. Especially if you're using the digital inputs, there's one important thing you should know about ISS. The speakers will not fall asleep as long as there is a clocking signal detected. So even if you don't play audio from your AACBU source, it will not fall asleep because it detects the clocking signal. It may be needed to switch off the source completely. Yes, and finally we can click on Store to save the settings to the speakers. I won't do this right now because I want to keep my original settings. If you want to do a factory reset, for most of the models, you can simply hold down the power button for 10 seconds. But you can also use this option. Click on Factory Reset and then Store. Let's have a short look at the menus, starting with the File menu. I think I don't have to explain the first points to you. Save to Cloud means that you can store your complete setup to your cloud space, and you can open it from there as well. In the Group Preset menu, you can find some options we already used: Add, Duplicate, Edit, and Calibrate. You can also delete a group. The Sound Character Profiler, I've shown this before, can be used to adjust the overall tonal balance. Standard Loudness SPL calibration, I will talk about this in the end. Set preset levels, we already did this in the beginning. Store settings to loudspeakers, you also know what's going on here. You can save the settings to your speakers for standalone use. And View Summary shows you the basic information about the group. And you can add comments. The first option in the Setup menu is SAM System Power. With GLM 5, it's now possible to use the auto standby of ISS even if GLM is running. Just activate Enable ISS with GLM Online. You can also set the sensitivity and the ISS delay. To wake up your system again, always use the power button in the top right corner. You can turn your system on automatically with the start of GLM. And it can also be shut down the moment you close GLM. Just enable these options. Shutdown Group Off monitors will automatically turn off devices that are not used in your active group. Let's say you have a larger immersive system and you are using a stereo group for editing. With this setting enabled, all monitors except left and right will be turned off the moment you select the stereo group. Enable USB controller should be set if you are using the Griffin power knob. Enable RF remote should be set if you are using our wireless remote control. We already spoke about system startup level and maximum level restriction. The LEDs can be turned on and off here as well. And Edit Layout brings you back to the beginning, where you can configure your basic setup. So for example, if you want to add speakers from the pool, then this is the way you should go. Settings contains the MIDI settings. You can configure a lot of functions of GLM to be controlled with any MIDI device. Just enable the MIDI interface, choose your device, and start customizing it to your needs. In GLM 5 you can now, for example, solo or mute speakers by using their new MIDI ID. This can be found in the info panel of each device. We have a separate video about using an Elgato Stream Deck as a controller for GLM. Theme lets you change the look of GLM. You can choose between a dark mode and a light mode. Level panel is useful when you are outside of GLM. So for example, you are working in your DAW and you change the volume using a controller. You can then define how long this window should be visible, starting with 2 seconds up to 5 seconds. And you can also define the position. You can enable and disable keyboard shortcuts, and you can find these in the manual. And under language, you can choose your own language. We're continuously working on adding more. And then we have tooltips. If you enable them, you will get tooltips the moment you point at a function, just to get a short explanation what's happening here. Finally, you can turn on and off the level metering within the icons of the devices. In the Services menu, I can see my login status. If I'm logged out, the other options are grayed out. Grayed report order will generate our detailed room acoustics report for you, based on your last calibration, giving you a deep insight into the performance of your setup in your specific room. You will receive it by email within a few minutes. Please check out our video about grade and visit our website under genelec.com/glm-grade. Under product registration, you can register your devices for our extended 5-year warranty. And Get Support is the way to go if you have any questions. Your setup file will automatically be attached, And you can also upload a photo of your setup, which can help us to evaluate your listening situation. Under Help, you can find the GLM5 manual and some online resources. It's also possible to export your setup to desktop. This will generate a zip archive, including all the needed files, for example, to send it to us. And About shows you which version of GLM you are running and if you are up to date. As promised in the beginning, let's now have a closer look at the frequency responses of your system, how you can evaluate them, and what you can learn from them. If you want to show these, just select Edit and then click on the icons. I'll now start with the subwoofer. First of all, we always show 3 curves, a red one, a green one, and the blue one. The red one shows the real frequency response that has been measured in your room at your listening position. So this is the reality. The blue curve shows the filters that GLM is using to compensate for the influences of your room. For example, here you can clearly see we want to compensate this peak. So therefore we are using this filter and the resulting response is shown in green. The frequency response of my subwoofer looks good after calibration, because the resulting green curve really looks linear. In general, I have significant peaks caused by the acoustics of my small room. The good thing, peaks can be compensated by calibration. Notches can only be compensated by better placement and acoustical treatment. If you would see large notches in here, in this range of the subwoofer, you should always try to find a better placement for the subwoofer. It's important to place it on the floor, close to the wall, to prevent the reflection from causing a cancellation. But of course also other walls, like side walls, could have an influence. And therefore it makes sense to simply change the positioning. For example, move it to the left or to the right. It's usually also recommended to have the subwoofer not directly on the middle axis of the room, simply because room modes love symmetries, and as we cannot localize the lowest frequencies, it's not a problem to place the subwoofer a little off-axis compared to your speakers. What you can also see from here is the level compensation. So this is used to match the level of the subwoofer to the speakers. In my case, the subwoofer is set to 0. And here you can see the phase setting that is used, and this has been adjusted using the AutoPhase process. But once more, if I'm getting a response like this, I'm absolutely happy, because now the complete low bass range is linearized. Let's now have a look at my speakers. Once more, you can see there are clear peaks caused by the room acoustics. And then for the first time we see a deeper notch. And as said before, we cannot compensate for that notch, simply because usually these notches are caused by reflections. And let's say you have a distance to your back wall of 1 meter. This will cause a notch. It's the quarter wavelength rule, because a distance of 1 meter will give you a notch at approximately 90 Hz. If you would boost this frequency now, you would boost the direct sound, but the reflection from the wall will be boosted as well. So there still would be a cancellation. We are using a small amount of positive gain depending on the model, but just to adjust the overall tonal balance. And we never use narrow filter settings. So as you can see here, we use a small amount of positive gain, but of course this dip will not disappear. The only chance to change this is to find a better positioning of the speaker. For example, close to the wall, or of course use some treatment like bass straps. If notches are related to the floor or ceiling, you can try out a different height of the speaker. And sometimes it can of course also make sense to check out a different listening position. If you are using a subwoofer with bass management, you will have more options. I would try to find the best position for the sub first, to get a linear response after calibration. I can then compensate for notches in the frequency response of my speakers up to the crossover frequency. For example, I could choose a higher crossover frequency like 100 Hz, so notches in the frequency response of the speakers below 100 Hz would not be critical anymore. Let's have a look at the other speaker. Once more you can see these peaks, but for example this range is better on that side. You can see that GLM is not using filters for the upper mids and high frequencies, simply because this range is highly dependent on where your head is positioned. So a slight movement to the left or to the right side will change this response completely. And therefore you should not do anything here. And it's also really important to understand that some ups and downs are absolutely normal. If you see larger problems in the mid-range, It's often related to reflections from desks or consoles. It can help to use stands or table stands. What's also important to know is that we show a really high resolution here. So for example, we are using a smoothing of 1/12 of an octave in the bass range below 300 Hz, so you can really see the details. And we are using 1/6 of an octave for the rest of the frequency spectrum. As I said before, the level compensation is used to match the level of the speaker to the level of the subwoofer. Time of flight is usually used if your speakers don't have the same distance to your ears. If a speaker is positioned too close to you, the speaker will be delayed and of course the level will be changed. This is really useful for immersive or surround setups if speakers cannot be positioned at the same distance from you. If you are using a standard stereo system and you are sitting in an equilateral triangle, which of course is the best option, you should always check if the time of flight is set to 0, because this gives you the precise phantom center. If you are having any problems with this phantom center, you can of course use level compensation and time of flight to fine-tune this exactly to your needs. You can also edit all filters that are used by GLM manually. We are starting with the shelving filters, then you see the notch filters, and at the end you can always find a lot of filters that are not used at the moment. So if gain is set to 0, then these filters are not used by GLM. And you can make use of them to further optimize the frequency response. To sum it up, place all the components of your system as good as possible. So for example, check out our monitor setup guide and you will find a lot of recommendations where you should place speakers or subwoofers. You can evaluate the results using the frequency responses in GLM. Then of course it's highly recommended to use acoustical treatment in your room, because this also helps with the time domain, for example with the reverberance of your room. The Grade Report is the perfect tool for planning acoustical treatment. If you follow all of these steps, your system can be a perfect basis to work with, or of course, simply to listen to music. Finally, let's have a look at the standard loudness calibration. This allows you to calibrate your system to a loudness standard. You can choose the standard you want to use. The default is EBU R128. You can then choose the LOFS value you want to calibrate to, and the SPL at standard level. And then you simply place your microphone at your listening position and click on Start Calibration. And you see this is done quite fast. If you now click on Confirm, you will realize that the value is now displayed as dB SPL. You can switch back by clicking the SPL button. It's of course also important to adjust the level from your source as well. Please check this paragraph in the manual for further information. We hope that this walkthrough has given you a good basis for getting started with GLM. Thanks a lot for your interest. If you have any more questions, feel free to contact us under support@genelec.com or check out genelec.com/GLM.